So seeing as though we've just imported and set up the Baobab 2 asset, I thought it'd be a good idea to take this model into a fresh scene and we grow some ivy up it. So I'm going to copy this model, so Control C, and I'm going to paste that into our new scene. And the reason why I do this in a new scene is to sort of compartmentalize and break things down. I find if you try to do too many things in one scene at any given time, it starts to get a little bit confusing. I'm going to go into manual mode. We're going to delete the batch leaves. We don't need that. Delete the material and make sure that we're keeping the transform. That's very important. If we were to simulate leaves up this bark, then it'd be a lot more difficult to scale this down. So it's important that we simulate the leaves with the tree at the correct scene scale. Okay, so let's go out. We'll put that back in auto update so it loads. So we have our geometry to generate ivy on. We'll jump inside and we're going to drop down the ivy taming plugin. So there's only 3 different nodes that you have to use, and this is why it's such an amazing plugin. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to drop down an ivy taming geo guide node. So every time we generate ivy, we need a geometry guide, and in this particular case, our geometry guide is the trunk. So let's plug the transform into the input number 1. We don't need to plug anything else into the other 2 inputs. Let's view that. So then we have a thing called voxel size, and the lower the number here, the higher resolution this will be. So if we put this to something like 0.1, that's getting higher res. If we put that to 1, then we get sort of this kind of shape. So I think 0.1 is absolutely fine. And of course, the lower the number this is, the higher resolution the mesh is, and that will also increase computation time. So it's a good idea to be quite sensible with this number. So the next thing we need to do is drop down an ivy taming core. So the very left input needs, or it says, points. So in order to grow the ivy on this model, we need 1 point to specify where this ivy grows from. The other inputs we can pipe this into here, just like that, nice and simple. And we need to provide a point for this ivy to start growing from. So I'm going to drop down an add sop. Let's plug the add sop in to input number 1. Let's view. Okay, so you can see that it's actually generated ivy from here. Let's view that point. We'll tick it, so we're turning that point on. I'm going to zoom right in, and if you're unable to zoom, you can click D on the keypad, go to the View tab, and just change your clipping to match these settings. Okay, cool. Let's also turn on points so we can see the point, which is there. Let's also turn on the point number as well so we can see we've got 1 point and that point is 0. So we've got 0.0 and it's at the origin, so the center of the scene. We could add another one and then we get point number 1. We can actually move that out, so I'm middle mouse clicking on the X channel here and we can just sort of move that one out there. Let's turn the 0.0 on as well, so we've got 0.0 and 0.1. But I think for this case, we're only going to need 0.0. Also made a note about where I put this point. It's pretty simple, really. So this is what I wrote. So 1.3845. So I just shifted this out to 1.3845 to there. Let's just see where that point is now. And it's here, so it's jumped from the origin all the way over to here, and you can see this if I slide it. So let's view from the ivy taming core, which is there. We'll turn off the points now, we don't need that. And you can see that the ivy is not grown all the way up the trunk, and that's because we don't have enough iterations. So just remember that if we lower this step size, then this is going to take a lot longer. So the higher the step size is probably the better. So we'll leave that at 0.1, and then I'm just going to slide up this iteration, and we're just going to watch that ivy grow all the way up the trunk. Such an amazing tool, it really is. I think we'll go to something around there. I think that's looking quite nice. Kind of seems that the ivy is a little bit too far out. So I'm just looking at these settings. So we've got a wall offset there. I'll put that to something like 0.1. So that's really sticking right to the surface. And in Houdini, Houdini works in meters. So just bear that in mind. So this is now saying 10 centimeters. And this is a pretty large tree, so it's quite hard to tell the distance between here and here. But I think overall that's looking pretty damn good. There are also options to replace the leaf geometry, but I think we're going to leave it as is. It's pretty high resolution, so if I hit W on the keyboard, you can see there that there's actually thickness on these leaves, which is going to look amazing when you render it, because you can use SSS instead of backlighting, or you could use backlighting as well. So it looks super good. But I think we'll sort of dive into this asset a little bit more in a dedicated tutorial. But I think for now, for this course, this will be absolutely fine. Okay, cool. So it's time to export this ivy. So I'm going to drop down a ROP geometry output, and that allows us to export the geometry from here. So you can see here we've got different types of things that we can export. So pack primitives, merged result. Let's take the merged result and we'll plug it in. Let's browse. I think I'll set my project as well. So we're going to set project, browse this project, click accept, load, got a job, so $job, so it's a relative path. And we'll go to I think we'll make a cache folder actually in here. Just going to check that there's nothing else in here. We can save that in assets, that's absolutely fine. Okay, so I'll $job, assets, BGO, we're going to save this out as. So we're going to say IV vines underscore v001 dot BGO. It's important to add that extension. So on here, we're going to turn off the leaves like that. We're going to hit render, so save to disk, and we're saving the current frame, so just one frame. That's saved. Let's copy this. I think we'll rename this to vines, and we'll rename this to leaves. Replace the file on here to leaves. Go back to here, we'll turn the liana off, and we'll turn the leaves on. And we'll save that to disk. I think also as well, we'll turn the output emitter off. I'm just going to re-render that. So turn the liana back on, leaves off, save to disk. Back to the taming core, liana off, leaves on, save to disk. Let's drop down 2 file stops. So we did this earlier when we were importing our assets. We want to import this asset here. So a really nice way of doing this is copying the parameter, and we can just paste a relative reference here. If you left click on the geometry file, this will show, or middle mouse click rather, it will show the file it's importing, which is really cool. So you can view that. There's the vines. Copy and paste that file. Copy the parameter for the leaves. Middle mouse click, or middle mouse click there. Paste relative reference. So we've got the liana and the leaves. And then when we're back in the other scene, we can just do a nice merge, and we can grab the both of those, merge them together, and then we have our result. So we created some really cool looking ivy leaves. But the first problem is that they're pretty dense. So there's a lot of polygons there. And that's going to slow us down a little bit. The second problem is that these leaves are extruded. And if we're going to be using a double-sided material, then we need to be using single-sided geometry. So that's not going to work for us. I'm going to jump into the ivy, and we're going to drop down a file stop. We're going to import a leaf that I've made. Let's view it. Space G to frame up. It's really basic. I've just bent the plane, added a few edge loops, and this is perfectly square as well. I'm going to go out and we're going to drop down a test Tommy. Like so. You can see the leaf is huge because it's coming from Maya. And Maya works in centimeters, Houdini works in meters. So this is currently 100 times the size it should be. So let's scale that down. Transform. And scale this down to 0.01. So now if we zoom in there, you can kind of see that's about the right size, but ivy leaves tend to be a little bit bigger. So scale it up just a touch to maybe something like 0.03, 0.028. Yeah, 0.03 is fine, I think. And we have to remember that we're using opacity mapping, so some of this will get cut out. So I think that's looking fine. Let's drop down a null, and this is kind of like what we do at the end of our shading by adding a shading group. We'll call this ivy leaf primitive or prim underscore out. And then we can reference this in the ivy taming core. Let's turn off test Tommy. View from the ivy taming core. Wait for that to load a moment. Okay. Output leaves as well. And if we go to the source geo tab, we can add custom leaves. Let's click it. So this is asking us for a HD leaf, so high definition leaf. And it's also asking us for a low definition leaf. So it will base the collisions and the calculations on the low definition leaf, and then you can whack on a nice high definition leaf, which is a bit of a cheat, but it's really fast. So we're going to load in our leaf. So ivy leaf out prim. Let's load that in. And we're just going to copy this and paste it into the high def, because this leaf that we created is really low resolution anyway. And one thing that we need to remember, something that I just forgot, is that the leaf needs to be between 0 and 2. So let's do that. I'm going to go to the top view. I'll press space 3 or space 2 on my keyboard, and we just need to shift this down. So I'm shifting it down in Z, so it's between 0 and 2. And this is a requirement by Ivy Taming, and this is in the documentation that you can check out. So I'm just going to slide that down like that. Okay, something like that. if we go out, space 1, you'll notice that the leaf is the wrong way around, so it should be pointing this way between 0 and 2. So I'm just going to rotate this by 180 degrees. There you go, so the leaf is coming outwards. Let's view the taming core once again. And now we've got leaves that are facing the correct way. But the leaves before were a lot larger. We were kind of cheating it a little bit. So the larger they are, the faster this is going to compute because there's less of them. So we can cheat this and we can just scale this up to something like, I don't know, 0.1. Let's try that. That's not looking too bad. That looks pretty cool. Maybe even a little bit larger. And we can always come back in and we can change this if we're not happy later on. It's just really fast to update. So I think something like that will be absolutely fine. Yep, kind of happy with that. We can go back out to here, turn off the liana, output the leaves, and this time instead we're going to call this ivy leaves prim underscore v001, save to disk. So as always, feel free to skip this step if you need to, as we've already done the texture conversion process before. I'm just more or less repeating it. I also made these ivy leaves in Photoshop exactly the same way as we made the other atlas leaves. It's way too dark there. Way too dark. I'd like to gamma up a little bit as well. I don't like these veins getting too hot. Pull down that white point just a touch there. View from here, that looks like a much more sensible exposure for an sRGB texture. Yeah, I think that's looking okay. But those veins are standing out a hell of a lot there, so I'm not too happy with that. Let's drop the highlights. Midtones, okay, most of the range is in the midtones. That makes it difficult to pull them down. I think we can settle with that for now though. That's not looking too bad. Maybe even just pull that gamma down a touch. Something like that. Yeah, that's okay. Let's apply that to here as well. Yeah, it's looking okay. The translucency maps seem to be alright because they're quite bright. Just a touch brighter there. Yeah, it's fine. And finally the translucency back. It's going to need a bit of a boost there. That's kind of dark, that one. So we'll gain that right up. So we'll lift up the gamma as well. Something there. Keep going with this. Yeah, I think that's alright. But I mean, again, that's still pretty damn dark. So just viewing from the grades, just checking the exposure there. Yeah, I think they're okay. Let's wipe this one out. This is the copy that. Make a new folder called acescg. Paste underscore acescg.exr. And we'll hit render. Copy, paste that. It's the diffuse back. Copy, paste, trans color. Trans col, and that's the front one. So, render. Paste, and this is the trans col back. Yeah, that's correct. Let's add those ivy leaves in. Drop down a file node, rename that to ivy. Jump inside, and let's find the ivy that we wrote out. So the veins first, showing up. Copy and paste. Loading the leaves primitive. Merge them together. View from the merge. Call this one leaves. This one vines or liana. And I think we're just going to view from the leaves for now. We'll create a material network. Excuse me. We'll call this ivy underscore materials. Nice. I think what we'll do is we'll copy material. I think we'll use the Atlas one. It's always a good one. Single front. Yeah, I think this one will do. Let's pinch that. Copy it. Paste it into the ivy materials. Like so. Let's get rid of translucency and the translucency amount. Just to clean this up, we'll leave the normal in. Let's delete the texture map from here. And we're just going to pipe the noise into the roughness. And I'm going to show you the power of just using noises in the roughness channel on the shader, because it can still do a really great job. You don't always need to use texture maps. So you've got these little beauties to work with as well. Cool. We'll drop down an RS texture to import the diffuse. So diffuse front, let's load that in. We will go via E, Digital Assets Library, Textures, Leaves, Ivy Leaves, Processed. I did process some ACCG versions, but I didn't think they were working very well. So we're going to use the standard sRGB textures, which I usually wouldn't do. But we're going to sort of jerry rig it and try to make it work. Let's plug that one in. And we'll plug in the normal map as well. Copy the path from the diffuse that we just loaded in. Paste it into here. Search, and we'll grab the normal front. Let's plug this into an RS sprite node, as usual, to cut out our leaf. We'll load in the Ivy Leaves alpha. We'll plug this into a redshift material, which is like the shading group that goes right at the end. And we'll rename this to, so Ivy Atlas. Yeah, that's fine. And call this front because we're going to create a double-sided material. Copy it, paste it, underscore out. It's more or less just repeating the same process that we've already done. Let's drop that on top of the leaves. Open the render view. I've already done some tests prior to this. Just check that that's correct. Yeah. I've also got bloom turned on as well. Just gives us a little bit of bloom coming from the sky. Just adds that extra bit of realism, which is nice to view. Okay, let's zoom in, see what it's looking like. So, I don't know, something around there. I see a few of them. So automatically they're looking pretty good. I mean, haven't really done too much. Just going to drop the black level down on this noise to about 0.3 to make these shinier. It's looking pretty cool. What I like to do as well is I like to flip the normal Y on the RS normal node. Let's see what that looks like. Yeah, I think that's working. Sometimes you just got to update that and just have a mess around with it, see what it looks like. I think they're looking pretty cool already. Yeah. Okay, so we've got the noise going into the roughness. That's looking cool. The diffuse is looking kind of nice as well. We'll copy and paste the diffuse front. We'll call this one trans col. Load in the translucency color font. Let's pipe that into the translucency color. And I didn't generate a translucency amount. So what we can do is we can just plug this one into an RS change range. That allows us to sort of mess with the values if we need to. And let's plug this into the translucency weight. Take a snapshot. Is it doing anything? And we're just going to look at the black levels here. So you can see there that get that nice lift there. That's really helping it out. If we need to, we can just pump this up. Let's view this map. Let's see what it's doing. So let's drop it into a redshift material. We'll apply that to the leaves. Okay, getting some really nice contrast there on the map. And that's really going to show up, which is cool. I'm also going to adjust my render settings because I don't think I turned them down. So just make sure that whenever you're working efficiently. So something maybe like 8 and 16 is fine. I think the camera resolution is set to 2000. Yeah, let's turn that right down. Back into the materials. Let's pump this up a little bit, I think. So we're getting a little bit more. So we're lifting up those black levels, which is going to reduce the contrast, which is something we might not want. Maybe zoomed out a little bit there. Just going to slide around with these levels here. We can even turn off bucket rendering to make it a little bit faster. Just playing around with those levels. But I think overall, I think that was actually looking pretty good. Let's drop that back on top of the leaves. hit bucket rendering, speed that up. And I think that's looking pretty cool. I'm kind of happy with that. That's really not looking bad. Actually start to see that the leaves are maybe a little bit on the bright side compared to the rest of the scene. And that's because we've loaded in sRGB textures, so they're going to automatically be brighter. So just watch out for that. We need to drop an RS color correct down and turn the level down so they're not so bright. I think that's looking a little bit better. What we can do as well, let's view the translucency color from here. Drop that on top of the leaves. So that's looking pretty good already. Maybe we could drop an RS color correct down. You could punch up the... No, it doesn't seem to like that. Let's remove it. Reapply. So we've worked on the front side, let's work on the back side. Copy all of it. Stop the render, paste all of it, and this is our back. Load in the back versions. Normal map back. Like so. Let's pipe this into a RS ray switch. Sometimes it takes me a moment just to remember what the nodes are called. So this one is the camera color back there. This one's the camera color front. We also need to plug this into the reflection as well. So reflection color and the back reflection color. Like so. Let's plug this into the sprite. Like that. We also need to enable front and back, enable front and back for the reflection. If you don't do that, then it's going to turn up and return really weird colors. See how we're looking now. I think what we'll do for the roughness as well is we'll up the roughness to something like 0.5, as the backside tends to be a little bit rougher. Disable this. I want the underside to be kind of a little bit brighter, so let's just lift that up. Maybe gamma up just a touch as well. Just going to put this up to 3, something crazy, see what's happening. Doesn't look like it's doing much there. Just check that this material is applied. Pause the render a moment. We're going to move around. I want to see the backside of one of these materials. It's actually kind of cool because if you look here and here, we can see the front and the back. So that should be a good way to gauge this. I've pressed play again. I think the roughness map is not working too well there. Let's adjust that. RS noise. I think we'll bring that overall scale down to something like 1. See what happens. It's better. 0.2. Yeah, it's looking better. Yeah, there you go. It's starting to look nice. 0.1. Yeah, it's looking alright. And you can see the backside material working there. Take a snapshot, and I'm going to flip the normals here. Made it a little bit darker, which I wasn't fond of, but it kind of looks, the normals actually look better there. I like to be able to push the scale of this up. Let's push that up to something like 0.6. Take a screenshot, put it back down to 0 so we can compare. So it is doing something, it's just subtle. I think we're going to leave it like that because once we point a light on this, it's going to become so much more obvious. I'm also going to update the RS noise here as well on the backside. So 0.1 was it? I think that's looking pretty cool. Let's go around the tree. I'll lock the camera so that allows me to move around. Let's view from here, see what that looks like. Refresh the render. Yeah, we're starting to get more backlighting happening here. Yeah, you see it there happening. Yeah, I think that's looking pretty cool. I'm quite happy with that. Let's zoom out and I'll pick a nice angle to look at it. And we will look at the tree as a whole. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. Yeah, I like that, and I also like the contrast in color between the ivy leaves and the leaves up here. You could push this a step further. We could grab the dirt that we made, so the material blender, paste that on top, do a snapshot so we can compare later, and we'll plug this gray switch into the base color and this into the sprite. Lift it up. So you can see there we get some dirt in there, which I think looks kind of cool. Just adds an extra little bit of variation. I think it's too strong. Let's turn down those white values. 1.4. Maybe even to 1. Yeah, I think that's sort of selling it a little bit more. Yeah, I think we can leave it on that. That's a nice one. Let's turn on the vines as well, so we'll view from the merge. Let's assign the materials on this level. So this is going to be using the, let's take a look. Yeah, we can use the acacia materials and we'll use the bark out. Nice. Apply material for the leaves. So leaves, and bark. Let's apply the ivy leaves. Ivy leaves, atlas, front out. And we should really rename these. Atlas. We could call this double-sided actually. That's probably a better name for the shading group right at the end. And you can definitely tell what's going on. I think I might be being a little bit blind here. There you go. Okay, let's take a snapshot and we'll view with the vines on. Yeah, there you go. We've got our vines in there now. And we applied that material with 0 effort, which is really cool. Nice one.